Hi everyone, my name is Kenzie from Mud Puppy Stitchery, and I'm back with another tutorial. My friend Marcy from Amnicon Studios stitched this beautiful piece called a Hope Song from Heartstring Samplery, and I offered to fully finish it for her. She was gracious enough to trust me with her beautiful stitched piece, and I had a blast making this for her. To start out, you're going to want to find yourself a wooden charcuterie board, which you can find at places like Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or even Target. Next, you'll want to pull out all of your decorative cordings and trims and have them on hand. And I was able to make this green variegated cording ahead of time using my custom quarter that I bought on 123 Stitch. In this video, I won't be showing you how I make the custom cording, because that would be an entirely separate video. But I am going to link Helen D's cording tutorial down below in the description box, and she does an excellent job explaining how to create your own custom cording. If you just have store-bought trim, those work perfectly fine as well. You're going to want to find some fabric scissors, and also some scrap scissors that you can cut through other things besides fabric. I would highly recommend picking up a compass, because we're going to be finishing in the round today, and it makes it so much easier to accomplish. I found these at Hobby Lobby for $2, so they're super inexpensive, but they make a big difference. Next, pull out any buttons and charms and doodads that you might want to add to your piece and just set them aside. You might not necessarily use them, but they're nice to have within reach just in case. You'll definitely need a hot glue gun, or if you're uncomfortable using a hot glue gun, you can use fabric glue. You'll also need some polyester quilt batting that you can find at any craft store, and some pretty backing fabric that complements the stitched piece. A ruler is also very helpful to have on hand, and this is just a random piece of scrap wood that I use to help press down seams that I've hot glued so that I don't burn my fingers. Not necessary, but very helpful. Last but not least, you'll need some sort of illustration board or sticky board to mount your pieces onto. The next thing you're going to want to do is to measure your piece and see how big you want the illustration board cut to. I want the sides to be right up close to the stitching, and so 21 centimeters was enough for me to have a little bit of Ada showing along the sides, but not much. I then divided that in half so that I could measure out the center of the circle. You're going to take that 10.5 centimeters and measure that out onto your illustration board. This will be the radius of your circle. You'll then take your compass and place the pointy edge into the center of the circle and the pencil part on the outside of the circle. While holding the center still, you can now swing the pencil all the way around until it makes a full circle. Now we can cut our circle. Make sure you use your scrap scissors and not your fabric scissors. We're just going to cut along the edge, doing our best to be neat, but if it's not 100% perfect, that is okay, because we are going to be gluing quilt batting onto the circle, so it will soften any rough edges. Next, pull out your stitched piece and cut off the excess fabric around the edges. Leave at least a 2-inch margin from where the stitching ends to where you're cutting. We'll need to pull out our glue gun and our quilt batting next. Lay your quilt batting flat on the table and set your circle on top of it. We're going to be cutting around the outside edge, but leaving at least a 2-inch border. This will help us later on. We're now going to take our glue gun and glue right onto the edge of the circle and fold our batting on top of it. Do this a little bit at a time, starting on one side and moving on to the opposite side, so that the batting is pulled taut as you're gluing. Now our circle is covered in batting and we're ready for the next step. You're now going to take out your stitched piece, flip it over to the back side, and we're going to do a loose running stitch right along the edge of the circle. Grab a very long length of thread and load your needle. We need to tie a knot right onto the edge of the fabric so that our stitches stay in place, and I ended up just doing a simple loop knot. You're next going to sew up and down to create a loose running stitch. This does not need to be perfect because nobody is going to see this. Continue along the outside edge until you've met back up at the beginning. Now that you've completed stitching around the entire outside edge of the circle, if you give the thread a pull, you'll notice that the stitched piece scrunches up and we can use our fingers to mold it into a little cup shape. We can then place the circle on the inside and then pull the thread to mold it around the circle. At this point, we're going to need to pinch and pull and adjust until we get the stitch piece just right. Once we're happy with it, we'll tie a strong knot at the base so that our stitches stay taut. We can now place it on top of our charcuterie board and admire how great it looks. But I'd like to add another circle behind the stitched piece, just so that it fills out the board a little bit more. We're going to do the same thing that we did before. Measure how much board you'd like showing around the edges, divide that in half, and use our compass to map out the circle. Cut out the circle and we'll be ready for the next step. Place your pretty fabric face down and cut around the outside edge of the circle, leaving at least 2 inches of excess fabric. Grab a threaded needle and do the running stitch around the outside edge of your fabric, just like you did before. After that, insert your circle and pull the thread taut. As I was pulling my thread, it actually broke, which ended up being okay, because I just hot glued the edges onto the circle. And now that you've got both circles covered, you can lay them on top of the board and get an idea of how you'd like them to look. Once you're happy with the placement, put a whole bunch of hot glue onto the back of each circle and press it down. You'll have just a little bit of time to wiggle it into place. If you're not as adventurous and want more time to adjust, just use a fabric glue instead that will dry slower. So now both circles are adhered, but not very well. I want to go along the inside edge of the circle and put some extra hot glue down so that the edges won't lift up. This will really adhere the circles to each other. Now is the time to place the trim onto the piece. I initially tried out the green variegated trim and it looked great, but it was sinking into the wedge, and I didn't like that look. I decided to place a different trim into the wedge that would blend a little bit more, and because I did this first, then this would bump up the green trim to the forefront, which was what I wanted. I then measured the white trim around the piece and cut the correct length, and started hot gluing it down carefully. Again, feel free to use the fabric glue if you're more comfortable with that. I didn't worry too much about making the ends of the white trim blend in, because we're going to be covering it with another trim. It was now time to finally add the green variegated trim on top of the white trim, so that it stood out better. I just used my glue gun again to stick it down. Towards the bottom where the edges were going to meet, I tied a little knot and left some hanging ends, just to make it look tidy and finished. I then felt like it needed one more trim around the outside edge, and this was a fancy wooden bead trim that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. It really made a nice transition from the fabric to the wood of the charcuterie board. I just hot glued it in place. And last but not least, I tied the rest of the green variegated trim onto the handle in case my recipient wants to hang it up. I really wanted to use one of the cute little charms that I had picked up, and so I came up with the idea of sewing it onto the green trim near the handle. This was the little touch that made the piece finished. And that was it. I had finished the piece, and off in the mail it went to Marcy. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and hopefully it encourages you to pull out some of your stitched pieces and get them FFO'd. If you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like and a comment, and if you're interested, please subscribe for more floss tubes and tutorials. Have a great day, and see you on the next one.